Hey everybody, welcome back to GR Research where we're doing speaker upgrades again. And today we're looking at the Focal Aria 906 model, which is this nice looking speaker. It's got a nice finish on it. I don't know if that's just a vinyl wrap. The front kind of has a leathery type material on it, and the top's got a nice high gloss. It's ported there at the front, and this is one of their models that retails in the $2,200 range, which brings up something very interesting to me because we do a lot of upgrades on a lot of speakers. Just whatever people send in, that's what we work on. And there's quite often I have $500 or $600 pair of speakers come in, and we do a $300 upgrade on it that transforms it from a throwaway speaker to a pretty nice speaker. But I always get those guys that'll say something in the comment section like, oh, I'd never spend that much to upgrade that speaker. I'd just buy a better speaker. Great. What are you going to buy? We're moving up now to the $2,200 a pair range. Let's take a look at what we get for $2,200. Cabinet steel, maybe 3/4 inch MDF, 19 millimeter MDF possibly. The woofer looks nicely made. I'm not sure what this material is, but I kind of like this material. Soft compliance. Voice coil is vented below the spider. Nice cast frame. Nothing else really strikes me about it. Then we've got the tweeter, and I'm thinking, man, I can remember back in the day, I was a Focal distributor, which means I stocked all of the Focal drivers. And itchy nose today. We used the Focal drivers in some of our early speaker models. And we used the old TC90, TDX, TC120, Mark II TDX, which were really nicely made tweeters. Today, they make them a lot less expensively than they were ever back in the day. The surround is just basically built into the dome, and it's resting on a layer of foam. Not like back in the day where this was actually a foam surround mounted to the diaphragm, and it used to have a big vented pole piece. Now there's no venting on the pole piece, just a little neo-magnet. So much more cheaply made than back in the day. Also, the covers for these just stick on with a sticky double-sided tape, basically, is what they've got going on that holds on these beauty rings. So that's a little disappointing. Normally you want to see it clipped on, held on. You pull this stuff on and off a few times, you may have to find you some more sticky tape to hold that stuff on. Now, here's where the rubber meets the road. I mean, this is what determines the good from the bad, the good from the great. It's all about the crossover parts. And here we are at the $2,200 range, and what do we get? Well, a lot of cheesy parts, to be honest with you. Little iron core inductor on the woofer, electrolytic cap on the woofer, little sandcast resistors. There are a couple of little bitty air core inductors. They're tiny little air core inductors. There's one tiny little poly cap on the tweeter circuit and a little sandcast resistor. That's it. The binding post maybe look good on the outside. No ferrous material on the outside, but when you flip it over, there's a steel nut, and this whole tab that's connected to the circuit board, steel. Nope, not copper, not brass, just steel. So, disappointing, really, very disappointing. Focal speakers are kind of known for having a brightness to it, and a lot of that is due to the inverted dome tweeter. It's a titanium tweeter. At least it used to be a titanium tweeter. Now this could be an aluminum tweeter. I don't know. But it's just not what it used to be. And but the brightness that was typically from that tweeter could be aggressive, could be sharp. It just depended. And for me, back when we were a Focal distributor, it was a love-hate relationship for those tweeters. If you put a capacitor on it that had a smooth sound, a tinfoil type capacitor or something like that, and a film and foil cap, and you had it on tube gear and you had it in a treated room, it was a pretty nice tweeter. it sounded really nice. Through a great image, through its very wide off-axis response. But if you had cheap capacitors on it, you had it on solid state gear, anything that was a little bit to the bright, harsh, aggressive nature, or an untreated room, those tweeters could really take your head off. So that's usually the complaint we get from a lot of the focal line is there's a brightness, there is sharpness. And again, even for me, it was a love-hate relationship. So was there brightness on this one? Let's look at the on-axis frequency response from the way this thing came. And it's an unusual response. If you look, you'll see it's voiced down in the upper frequency range. So you think, okay, well, they're compensating for the brightness, but actually not. If you look at the 300 to 500 hertz range, that's what we consider the heart of the mid-range. It's right in that range. And above that, we're getting into the trouble when you get into the 1K to 2K hertz range. There's your range of brightness. Anytime you have brightness in a speaker, it's typically found in that 1K hertz to 2K hertz range. You get above 2K hertz and you start getting into overtones, and you get above 8 to 10K hertz, you're looking at extreme overtones, and you're looking at those areas where you have those spatial cues. In this case, it's down in the range where you don't want it to be down. It's down up there in the overtone range, and right there in the, I want to say it's about 800 and 1800 hertz, there are two peaks. So let's look at those two peaks. Let's look at the spectral decay. You can see those two peaks there in the spectral decay, and you can see there's a little bit of stored energy there. So what that means is the woofer's playing that range, and it's causing, there's a little bit of a ring there up in that upper frequency range of the woofer. And you'll hear it like on the trailing edges of pianos, in the upper ranges of the female vocal. You might hear just a little harshness there because it's ringing there just a little bit. So that was an area that needed to be addressed. There's your area of brightness, and then a lot of that spaciousness was soft, because right up there as you get above 2K hertz and up, it's soft in that range, and then it ramps back up at the very top end. So let's look at the off-axis response. You look at the off-axis horizontal, you see it drops off rather nicely. And if you look at the off-axis vertical response, you'll see a drop right at the crossover region, which is actually way up there around 3500 hertz. You'll see a dipped area there. That's where you're moving up with the microphone, and the woofer is getting further away in time than the tweeter, and it's causing a time delay there where it's arriving out of phase, and it's causing that cancellation. Also, let's look at the impedance response. The impedance was a little mismatched. It wasn't really balanced. The upper frequency range where the tweeter is was much higher. It was up around 10 ohms, whereas down at the woofer range it dropped to about 4.5 ohms. Tuning frequency, you can see there in the middle, that lower range, right at the bottom of those two graphs there. I want to say it's around 50, somewhere right in there where the tuning frequency is. So when I looked at this, I thought I'm going to have to address two issues. There's going to be those two little peaks in the woofer's response, and let's flatten out the rest of that response and balance it out. So let's take a look at what I did with it. And new frequency response looks good. You'll see those peaks have been dropped down. That one peak at 1800 hertz is gone. I actually softened it right there because these tend to be a little bright and have a little bit of a glare to them in some cases. Or if they're in, like I said, a room that's not treated very well, they can tend to be bright in that area. So I softened it a little in that 2K hertz region to give it a little more of a softness and not so much of a bright in your face. So the overall balance now looks good. I brought the top end back up so that you have those spatial cues and things that are there. Spectral decay now. If we check this out, you'll notice it's much cleaner. That ringing is gone. You'll see across the frequency range it just drops off. Some of that was due to a notch filter that I had to put in the woofer's response curve there, or in the woofer circuit, to bring that stuff down and to take care of it. If we look at the horizontal off-axis, we see it's similar to the way it was. It drops off pretty evenly in the off-axis. But let's look at the vertical off-axis. You'll notice now I changed the order of the crossover so that as you move up and down, it maintains good phase relationship over a wide range. So if you stand up, the highs are not going to fall out of it. So that your overall room response will be much more balanced and just have a smoother overall response across the board. Now, crossover parts wise, we went from this cheesy stuff, which by the way is probably $10 worth of parts total in the $2,200 speaker. So I'm not sure what they're giving you to justify that kind of price point. Looking at this normally, I would see this kind of speaker, and I would think $700 to $800, maybe $1,000 at the most retail. You know, and that's going through dealer networks with a lot of markup and things like that. So I'm not really sure where they're getting to those price points. So what we did with it was we went to the larger air core inductors. No more sand gas resistors. No more iron core inductors. We've got good quality resistors. The big caps in the woofer circuit, those are poly caps. And I used an actual elliptical style filter to get the upper range out of this thing so it would quit ringing. There's 2 caps in the tweeter circuit, and those are sonic caps. That's going to give it a lot of clarity, way more than what it was allowing to pass through that little cap. We're replacing the binding posts, which, like I said, had steel connectors on them. I even had push-on connectors to the drivers, and we'll replace those with a set of tube connectors. That's going to improve clarity a lot. All new wiring, which is going to be high-purity copper wire, some solder, some heat shrink, everything you need, including a sheet of no-res to fix the cabinet resonances a little bit, which is not bad. I mean, there's one brace here, right through the box. As you can see it there in the middle, and that's all there really is. So it's not overly resonant, but there's still some resonance there. That one brace helps stiffen it, but it doesn't take away the ringing of the panel. Lining it with the no-res will soften that up a little bit, take away the ringing, and give you a lot cleaner bass and cleaner vocals. So what did all this come to? The whole thing came to $429 for everything. So new crossovers, 2 connectors, wiring, sheet of no-res, everything you need to take this speaker up to a level that it should have been from the factory, especially at a $2,200 price range. So what do you get when you spend more? Well, sometimes not anymore. Sometimes you do. There's a lot of speakers out there in those price ranges that may exceed the performance of this model, but I can tell you this, when you put this level of parts on it and make this level of improvements, you then have a speaker that is clearly in a value range in the $2,000 and up price points. So that's it for this one. You guys, I guess, can continue to send us more speakers for upgrades. We'll keep knocking them out, and see you guys in the next video. And also hit the subscribe button if you haven't. We appreciate that, and see you in the next one.